The ring cost $50,000. Private jeweler, velvet tray, 4 carats of investment-grade diamond, chosen not for love, but for optics. Derek Reynolds gave it to her the night he proposed, and for 12 years, Laurel wore it like a promise. But here's the secret Derek never knew. That ring was the cheapest thing Laurel ever accepted from him. Because while Derek was building magazine covers and collecting praise for his self-made empire, Laurel was routing millions through offshore trusts to keep his company alive. While he stood on conference stages calling himself a visionary, she was stabilizing cash flow during crises that would have destroyed him, while he laughed and smirked and offered her $5,000 and a bus ticket to end their marriage. She was the only reason there was a marriage worth ending. The only reason there was a company worth fighting over. The only reason Derek Reynolds had anything at all. This is the story of Derek Reynolds and Laurel. A marriage built on silence, a fortune built on secrets, and the moment a $50,000 ring became worthless compared to the woman who wore it. When Derek Reynolds proposed to Laurel, he did it the way billionaires do, quietly, efficiently, and with a price tag attached. The setting was a private showing at one of Manhattan's most exclusive jewelers, the kind of establishment that didn't advertise, didn't have a storefront sign, and only accepted clients by referral. The air inside smelled of leather and old money, polished mahogany, and the faint sweetness of roses arranged in crystal vases that cost more than most people's rent. A silver-haired jeweler laid the options on a velvet tray without comment. He had dressed the fingers of royalty and oil baronesses. He had seen men like Derek before, men who bought diamonds the way they bought cars for the statement, not the sentiment. Derek specified his requirements with the precision of a man negotiating a contract. 4 carats minimum, investment-grade clarity, a setting that would photograph well for the announcement. He never mentioned love. He never mentioned Laurel's taste. He mentioned optics. He chose the most expensive ring on the tray, $50,000. He paid with a black card that had no limit and signed the receipt without looking at the total. That night, in a private dining room overlooking Central Park, he placed the ring in front of Laurel between the second and third course. No kneeling, no trembling declaration of devotion, no speech about forever, just the ring, the question, and the expectation that she would say yes. Laurel looked at the diamond. She looked at Derek, and she said yes. Not because of the ring's value, but because she believed in the man offering it. Derek was rising fast, founder and CEO of Apex Global, a logistics and energy conglomerate that the media praised as a modern miracle. He called himself self-made. He called Laurel his lucky charm. And for a while, she believed love could survive inside boardrooms and balance sheets. Years later, Laurel would remember that proposal differently. She would remember the way Derek's eyes had flicked to the window when she answered, not to her face, but to their reflection in the glass, checking how they looked together. She would remember that his smile hadn't reached his eyes. She would remember that he'd called the waiter immediately after, as if the proposal was simply another item checked off a list. But that night, she chose not to see those things. That night, she chose to believe. Derek Reynolds was rising fast. Business magazines put him on their covers. Conference organizers paid 6 figures for his keynote speeches. Television hosts called him a visionary, a disruptor, a self-made success story for the new American century. Derek called himself all those things too. He also called Laurel his lucky charm. In interviews, he would mention her casually, my wife, my rock, my biggest supporter. He would smile for the cameras, and reporters would write about the billionaire who still believed in true love. What Derek never told the reporters, what he never even asked himself, was where the money really came from. What Derek never asked was where the money really came from. In the early days, when Apex Global was nothing but a business plan and a rented office, the company had nearly died a dozen times. Suppliers demanded payment. Investors backed out. Penalty clauses threatened to bankrupt them before they ever turned a profit. Derek had paced his office those nights, phone pressed to his ear, begging banks for extensions they wouldn't give. And then, somehow, the crisis would resolve. Capital would appear, cash flow would stabilize. The suppliers would be paid, the investors replaced with quieter, more patient money. Derek assumed it was luck. He assumed the universe was rewarding his vision. He never questioned the timing, never investigated the source. Behind the scenes, Laurel wasn't just a supportive wife. She was the silent architecture of Apex Global's survival. She routed capital through layered trusts designed to be invisible. She stabilized cash flow during crises that would have destroyed the company. She shielded Apex Global from collapse again and again, always from the shadows, always without credit. Derek took the applause. Laurel sat in the audience and watched. She chose invisibility because she loved him, because she trusted him, because she believed that love meant lifting someone up without asking to be seen. Subtle foreshadowing number 2. But trust has limits, and Laurel, without quite knowing why, kept records. Every wire transfer, every trust agreement, every document that proved what she had built while Derek stood on stages accepting praise. She told herself it was organization. She told herself it was prudence. She didn't yet know it was evidence. The shift didn't happen all at once. It happened in small moments. Moments Laurel noticed but chose to explain away. The way Derek stopped asking about her day, the way his eyes would slide past her at company events as if she were furniture, present, functional, but not worth attention, the way he started checking his phone during dinner, even when she was mid-sentence. 12 years of marriage, 12 years of silence, and somewhere along the way, until love became leverage. Laurel first felt it at a charity gala in the Hamptons. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across a ballroom that smelled of champagne and expensive perfume. Derek held court near the bar, surrounded by investors, telling the story of Apex Global's early days. The struggle, the sacrifice, the nights he'd slept on his office floor because he couldn't afford both rent and payroll. She listened from across the room. He didn't mention her, not once. That night in the back of a limousine, she asked him about it. "You never mentioned me in those stories." Derek didn't look up from his phone. "What stories?" "The founding of Apex, the early years. You tell them like you were alone." He shrugged. "I was alone. You were supportive, sure, but this was my vision, my risk, my company." The words hung in the air. Laurel looked at the ring on her finger. $50,000, 4 carats, investment grade. And for the first time, she understood exactly what it had always been. A transaction. The divorce was swift, brutal, calculated. Derek's attorneys filed the papers on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, Laurel was served in the lobby of the building where she had once stabilized the company that paid for every marble tile beneath her feet. Derek's offer arrived by courier. Inside the envelope, a settlement agreement, a non-disclosure agreement, and a one-way bus ticket. The settlement amount, $5,000. $5,000. As if 12 years of marriage could be erased with spare change. Laurel called to discuss. His attorney laughed. She requested a meeting with Derek directly. He smirked. "You want equity?" Derek said, leaning back in his office chair. "You want to claim part of my company?" "Our company," Laurel said quietly. Derek's smirk widened. "Laurel, sweetheart, you're a woman who once wore an expensive ring, that's all. The ring is replaceable. So are you." He slid a pen across the desk. "Sign the NDA. Take the check. Get on the bus. And be grateful I'm offering anything at all." Laurel looked at the pen. She looked at the man she had loved for 12 years. And she made a decision. The courtroom had the particular silence of rooms where fortunes change hands. High ceilings, wood-paneled walls stained dark with decades of cases, the faint smell of old paper and leather, history soaked into every surface. Outside, Manhattan traffic hummed its endless rhythm, but inside, the only sound was the shuffling of documents and the occasional cough from the gallery. The courtroom becomes a stage where illusions collapse. Derek Reynolds sat at the plaintiff's table with 3 attorneys, the most expensive divorce team money could buy. His suit cost $8,000. His watch cost more than most people's cars. His confidence was absolute. This was a formality, a signature, one final move to erase the woman who had dared to ask for what she deserved. Laurel sat alone at the defense table, calm, composed, unremarkable, exactly as Derek expected her to look. His attorneys opened aggressively. They presented Laurel as a dependent spouse with no professional credentials, no business experience, and no legitimate claim to Apex Global's assets. They produced financial statements showing Derek as the sole signatory on every major account. They argued that Laurel's contribution was emotional support, valuable perhaps, but not compensable. They offered as a gesture of goodwill to increase the settlement from $5,000 to $10,000. Derek nodded along, satisfied, and then Laurel's counsel stood. The attorney was a woman Derek had never seen before, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the quiet authority of someone who had argued cases in rooms that mattered far more than this one. Your Honor, she began, we would like to introduce evidence that reframes the financial history of Apex Global. Derek's lead attorney objected. The judge overruled him. What followed was systematic, methodical, devastating. Financial records appeared on the courtroom screens. Wire transfers dating back to Apex Global's earliest days. Trust agreements with complex layered structures. Capital infusions that had arrived precisely when the company was about to collapse. Financial records surface. Trust agreements unravel. None of it came from luck. All of it traced back to Laurel. Every crisis that had mysteriously resolved. Every cash flow emergency that had somehow stabilized. Every investor who had quietly appeared at exactly the right moment. Her capital, her connections, her architecture. Derek's face went pale, and then the courtroom doors opened. A man walked in, tall, composed, moving with the unhurried confidence of someone who had addressed sovereign wealth funds and parliamentary committees. Lucas Kensington, one of the most powerful private financiers in the world. Laurel's brother. Derek had never known Laurel had a brother. She'd never mentioned family. He'd never asked. He'd assumed she came from nothing, that her quietness meant emptiness, that her silence meant she had nothing worth saying. He was wrong about everything. And when Lucas Kensington steps forward, Derek's narrative disintegrates in real time. Lucas took the witness stand and spoke with surgical precision. He explained the trust structures Laurel had built, the capital she had personally provided, the interventions she had orchestrated during every crisis that would have destroyed Apex Global. He explained that Laurel had chosen invisibility, not because she had nothing, but because she loved a man she believed deserved her sacrifice. He explained that Apex Global was never Derek's empire. It was Laurel's investment. Derek's attorneys scrambled. Objections were overruled. Motions were denied. The self-made myth collapsed completely. The judge removed her glasses. The courtroom fell silent, the kind of silence that precedes earthquakes. Mr. Reynolds, she began, her voice carrying absolute authority, this court has reviewed the evidence presented today. The documentation is extensive, thorough, and unambiguous. She paused. You have represented yourself, both to this court and to the public, as the sole architect of Apex Global's success. The evidence contradicts that representation completely. Derek's hands trembled. The capital that built your company came from your wife. The structures that stabilized your company were designed by your wife. The interventions that saved your company during its most vulnerable moments were orchestrated by your wife. Another pause. And your response to 12 years of partnership was to offer her $5,000 and a bus ticket. Her voice hardened. This court does not reward arrogance. This court does not validate contempt. The judge's ruling is merciless. Derek loses control. Assets are frozen. His name, once synonymous with success, becomes a case study in arrogance. The man who offered $50,000 for a wedding ring walks out with nothing but regret. Laurel walks out with everything, not because she planned revenge, but because she finally stopped pretending she was small. She left the courthouse without looking back. No press conference, no victory speech, no moment of public triumph. The ring was still on the table inside. $50,000 of diamond and platinum abandoned beside the documents that had dismantled Derek's empire. She hadn't taken it. She didn't want it. It had never been about the ring. Outside, Manhattan continued its endless rhythm. Taxis honking, pedestrians rushing past, the city churning forward as it always did, indifferent to the fortunes made and lost behind courthouse doors. Lucas was waiting by a black car at the curb. "It's done," he said. Laurel nodded. She paused before getting in, looking back at the courthouse steps where, somewhere inside, a man who had laughed at her was learning what it meant to lose everything. She didn't feel triumph. She didn't feel revenge. She felt something quieter, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in 12 years. She felt like herself. For so long, she had made herself invisible. She had accepted smallness as the price of love. She had believed that staying silent meant staying safe, that supporting someone from the shadows was the same as being valued. She had been wrong. This is not just a billionaire love story. It's a story about money used as power, silence mistaken for weakness, and the cost of underestimating the woman who paid the price long before the bill came due. Final moment, natural cliffhanger. The car pulled away from the curb. Inside, Laurel watched the city scroll past the tinted windows. Buildings where deals were made. Restaurants where she had sat silent while Derek took calls. Streets she had walked while keeping his company alive from the shadows. All of it behind her now. Lucas glanced at her from across the seat. "What will you do now?" It was the first time anyone had asked her that question in 12 years. The first time the answer belonged only to her. She didn't respond immediately, because for the first time, she didn't have to be invisible. She didn't have to be small. She didn't have to pretend. "I don't know yet," she said finally, "but it will be mine." The car merged into traffic, disappearing into Manhattan's endless flow. But back on the courthouse steps, Derek Reynolds stood alone. His attorneys had left. The reporters had scattered. The cameras had moved on to the next story. He stared at the doors Laurel had walked through. His empire, gone. His reputation, destroyed. His wife, no longer his. A man like Derek Reynolds had never lost anything in his life. He had never been humiliated, never been exposed, never been forced to stand in the wreckage of something he thought he owned. His hands curled into fists at his sides. The shock was fading. Something colder was taking its place. He didn't know how Laurel had hidden this from him. He didn't know how deep her secrets went. He didn't know who else had been watching while he built his life on a foundation she controlled. But he was going to find out. Derek Reynolds had lost today, but losing wasn't the same as surrender. And Laurel had made one mistake. She had shown him exactly how powerful she really was. Now he knew what he was up against. And men like Derek Reynolds didn't disappear quietly.